have been funny if I totally fell over backwards. I'm going to leave it in the video. So how's it going? Doing alright? Ready for fall? Ready for things to calm down and cool down a little bit? I am. And one thing that's a really common remedy is fire cider. And so I thought I'd make a video showing you how to make basic fire cider. Now, I say basic because I want you to know that there's like a million, billion, gazillion recipes for fire cider out there. There's no wrong way to make it. You can add or take away whatever ingredients you want to. And essentially, a fire cider is just an oxymel. I'm just going to put that out there. It's just an oxymel. And I'll dive into that in a little bit. But first, I want to talk with you about, like, look, I made a professional fruit bowl. It made me laugh. I'm like, I have to have a clear bowl or they won't be able to see what I'm talking about here. So I kind of just brought out like some really basic stuff that goes into fire cider, and again, you can add more, subtract, or whatever. So one of the first things, and I probably wouldn't skip on this, is ginger. Ginger adds a nice component of heat. She's a digestive aid. She's really good for your circulatory system, getting your blood up and flowing and moving, and she really helps you stay warm in the winter that way. But she's also pretty good at like boosting your immune system, and she's good for nausea and digestion and, you know, car sickness, all kinds of things. So ginger in herself is an awesome ally. If you can, work with fresh for this, with most of the plants, but you can go down to pretty much any grocery store and get yourself a little root clump. That's the professional term for it. Root clump. And you can go to the store and get yourself some root clump of ginger. The next thing that I like to use is a good old horseradish root. Now, I know some of you will ask, can I use jarred horseradish? And you can. I would just make sure that it's like a better brand that doesn't have a bunch of like oils and preservatives. Basically, if you're going to use something out of a jar, it needs to just be shredded horseradish root. And if you're going that route, you might as well find yourself some fresh horseradish root. And I mean, I live in Northeast Oregon. We're a food desert, and I wouldn't call us a cultural mecca for like differing types of like food availability in stores, yet they still carry fresh horseradish in our local Safeway, so you can probably find some in your area. And now, okay, let me remember to talk about horseradish. Horseradish, she's spicy, but she's not spicy for the same reason peppers are. She's actually really good for digestion, heart health, immune system. She's packed with antioxidants, and a lot of people use her for sinus infections because she's going to open up your nose and just open up the sinus cavities. But she's also good for like bladder infections, and she's also got some pretty awesome properties to her that help prevent like cancer reproduction in cells, you know, so she's an awesome one to have. And I like to get, I'm just going to pick her back up again, I like to get most of my heat in my fire cider from horseradish and ginger. This one's more of a, definitely a milder heat. This one's going to be spicy. It's going to make your eyes water when you cut her up. And then, of course, you've got your peppers. Now, you're going to want to use a spicy pepper. Look at me. Do I look like I genetically come from a place where, like, we ate spicy foods? No. So I don't make my fire cider very spicy because there's lots of really interesting studies out there that show, like, if your ancestors didn't evolve eating really spicy things that have capsaicin in them, so peppers, you know, it can kind of do a little bit of damage to your gut health if you overdo it. It's along the same lines of how like a lot of European people can digest milk, but a lot of people who aren't European can't digest milk, right? It's just what our ancestors evolved. So I don't particularly like to make mine very spicy with the use of peppers. I'm like, oh, that mild salsa's hot. That's just who I am as a person. I'm from like the cold north. So I only add like 1 pepper's worth to mine. But if you are somebody who likes the heat, or your ancestors used a lot of spice, you can definitely add more than 1 jalapeno or use a spicier pepper. I've seen some people like go a little overboard, like trying to use like ghost peppers and stuff like that. You need to be able to consume this. And you don't want to like really, really overdo it, because even if you're using peppers on an ancestral level. If you eat too much spice, you can really cause a lot of damage to your gut and inflammation no matter where you are, if you're like, if it's just too hot. So one good old jalapeno pepper. If you really, really don't want it spicy from the pepper, take the seeds out of this when you cut it up. A lot of the heat comes from the seeds. And then another type of heat I'm always going to add is garlic. So this is kind of like our hot pile, right? That sounded kind of gross. There's a hot pile here. This is our hot herbs, our hot plants. Like capsaicin is going to bring heat and help with circulation and heart health and things like that too. And so they all kind of have a similar thing. Garlic's really great for your immune system, getting your blood up and flowing. And of course, like, she's nice and spicy too. Like, if you've not worked with garlic a whole lot and you start chopping up a real amount and you're not using the stuff that are like the container or powder, it'll make your eyes burn a lot like an onion will for different reasons. But I really like garlic. She's great for boosting immune system. She's really good for heart health. I'm basically a broken record because a lot of these have similar properties. So I'm definitely going to add a good amount of garlic. Now, if you have the option to get garlic locally, you can ask them for a spicier or mild variety, because there's different varieties of garlic than just what you buy at the store. But whatever you get at the store is fine too. Okay, and then our last little root friend here is onion. Now, you can use a yellow onion or red onion. I like to use the red onion because she's got more antioxidants to her because of the color. She's got those beta-carotenes and things like that. And so I really like the red onion. Plus, she's kind of a little sweeter, so she helps take some of that edge off of the spicier components, although she is kind of a spicy one, right? Onion's really good for respiratory infections, bladder infections. She's really got a lot of natural sulfur in her, and the thing is, a lot of antibiotics these days, especially if you're dealing with respiratory and or bladder infections, are sulfur-based, right? So she kind of hits those same points. And then, of course, you've got an orange and a lemon. Now, these are pretty self-explanatory. They're packed with vitamin C, the ascorbic acid, and they're just all around good immune boosters. Now, you'll notice that I'm not holding up a grapefruit. I don't put grapefruit in my fire cider because I typically share my batches with people in my family, because I'm not trying to drink that much fire cider in a season. And the thing to know about grapefruit is that a lot of medications interact with her. She makes the medicine basically go inert in your body. So I don't like to add grapefruit to my fire cider if I'm going to be giving it out to anybody, because you don't know. I mean, statistically, almost everybody is on one or two or more prescription medications, and it's just kind of a risk that you run. You might be giving a gift to somebody and end up doing them harm because the grapefruit makes their medication do funky things in their body. And then I like to add a couple good sprigs of fresh thyme and fresh rosemary. These are both really good for immune system support. Thyme is fantastic for supporting lung health and really just getting your immune system up and going, and she's really good at breaking up mucus so you can cough it up. Rosemary has a lot of the same properties. I'd say that she's also really good for stimulating blood flow to your brain. That's not really why we're using her here. I mean, she is good for memory and attention and ADHD and things like that. But, I mean, there's not really going to be enough of her to get those properties. We're just after those, basically the volatile oils that are in her to help loosen up anything in our chest or open up our nose. Because usually when we're using fire cider, it's when we've got some type of infection, right? That was a real cough. I totally just laid it into the video. It's kind of smoky out here. But they're really great for getting in here and opening up your nose and getting that snot out and just kind of burning this stuff out of you, right? And so she's really, really good for that. So the next step is to chop all this stuff up. So I'm going to do a magic trick. You're gonna be like, wow, my mind is blown by this magic trick. Watch. All you have to do is put all of your herbs into this bowl, and then you sit it on the ground, and then you pull up your bowl of already chopped stuff. I mean, I couldn't resist because I already was doing stuff with my food processor, and I'm like, it'll be so much easier if I just pre-chop it for the video. Wouldn't that be cool though? We could just sit on the ground and be like, ta-da, it's chopped up. Anytime you set a bowl on the ground, it chops stuff up. So you've got the herbs that you need and the fruits and vegetables and things that you need and roots all chopped up. The next thing you're going to need is some apple cider vinegar. This is raw local apple cider vinegar that I use. You do not have to use raw apple cider vinegar. I like to because it has a lot of beneficial bacteria to help with gut health and digestion and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like because when I use something that still has the mother in her, which is what makes the vinegar in the first place, it's kind of like you are making kombucha or something like that, where you do your second ferment and it helps to pull out like the taste or the properties of whatever you've put in there, like if you're using like fruit or herbs or whatever. So same concept with using raw vinegar. I feel like it has more ability to extract all the things we're after, all the properties we're after in these plants than pasteurized vinegar, but you can use pasteurized vinegar too. What I don't want you to use is just plain old white vinegar. I mean, if like the world is out of apple cider vinegar and you can't find any locally and you can't order any online, then you could use plain white vinegar. But that stuff is best for like cleaning windows and counters and stuff. It's not necessarily something that I mean, you can use it in canning, but even then, ferment it instead of using white vinegar. But so apple cider vinegar is pretty integral to making a good fire cider. And then the next thing you're gonna need is some honey. I've got some raw honey, and this is out of my hives, and I'm really happy about that. But any local raw honey you can find, even if it's not raw. I mean, I like raw honey because you're not just digesting sugar. It's still sugar, but once you pasteurize it, it tends to lose all of its good, again, gut health properties. Get out of here, little bug. And it's just sugar. It's just sugar at that point because you've like cooked everything off of it. So some raw honey. Now, a lot of people think that raw honey, or the honey in general, is just to make it sweeter and easier to take, because this will be pungent. It really will be. And I mean, that's kind of the case, but what we're really using this honey for is to extract the water-soluble properties out of this chopped up bowl of stuff, because vinegar doesn't really go after that so much as she's going to target like the acid soluble stuff a little bit. So when we add, I mean, a little bit of water, but when we add a little bit of water-soluble properties from the vinegar, but not a whole lot. But when you add the honey, she's amazing at extracting the water-soluble properties from plants in general. So you get this really nice, well-rounded cider, fire cider. And again, that's just what an oxymill is. If you've watched any of my oxymill videos, you're just adding plant matter. You're just adding vinegar, and you're just adding honey to make this oxymill, and the honey is integral for those water-soluble properties from the plant. Whew, usually I don't put that much information out before I've even made a thing in front of you, but I just wanted to talk about it all. Okay, so the next step is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to chop up all of your veggies and your fruits and your roots and stuff like that. If you don't have a food processor, that's okay. I've got just like a cheap little, like, it was like one of those Black Friday $10 specials, Black & Decker ones. That thing has lasted me like 4 years. It's still going strong, so I pulled it out and used it. And you can just chop it by hand if you don't have a food processor. You don't need to go out and buy any more equipment unless you like, you don't even have to go buy a funnel. I'm just like going to make less of a mess because I have it. And you're going to need a jar that you can fill up all the way. So you'll see I have all my oranges and stuff just kind of centered up, cut up. Don't know where I get words sometimes. This is my horseradish all sliced up. So I'm just going to put this stuff in there first. And then I'm going to put the citrus in there. Because if I put the citrus on the bottom, I lose a little bit more room. In my mind, I might not. Just whatever. Let me do things a weird way. So this is all my ginger and my peppers and my onions and my garlic all chopped up. And before I forget, let me shove my rosemary and thyme in there. That was the fresh herbs. You can use dried herbs if you don't have the fresh on hand or don't want to buy the fresh. Dried are okay too in this case, just for the rosemary and the thyme. Or you could just not add rosemary and thyme if you don't want to. Oh, I lied. Look, I got orange in there already. Okay. So I do like to use a food processor if I have one available because typically I can fit more in a jar, you know, versus cutting it up chunky. It takes up more airspace and you can't get as much in there for the vinegar. And unlike a tincture where I tell you not to like cut stuff up a lot because the alcohol and the plant know what they're doing, with the vinegar, the more surface space, the better to an extent. I mean, don't put it through like a food processor where it looks like baby food. You know, it's still, you could still distinguish what parts of what are in here that I cut up. You know, you can still visibly tell what it is. Because then you won't be able to strain it very well. But I like to cut it up a little bit more because I am giving the vinegar more room, surface space to extract from. Okay, so now I'm going to add some vinegar. I just thought to myself, $5 says I spill this. Okay, so here comes some vinegar. No, I'm a pretty good pourer. I do it a lot. So don't fill it all the way up because you still got to add your honey. But I kind of like to add some of the vinegar first because the honey kind of makes like a wall that you can't get past, you know, because it's thick and doesn't want to let stuff go past it. But what's really neat is that vinegar is really good at dissolving honey. Like the next time you have a honey mess, you can use hot water to clean up, but you could also use some vinegar, and the acid really breaks the honey down. So I'm pretty much just going to fill this the rest of the way up with honey, and then we'll let it sit, and there you go. You can see, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's kind of like, you know, doing air pockets up, but that's pretty much all of my honey. Now you can put more honey or less honey. It's completely up to you. You can make a smaller jar. You can make a big gallon jar if you want to. This is a half gallon. So basically, while I let that settle, the next step is you would take, I'm not prepared, you guys. I'm not completely prepared at any point in time. Usually I can roll through it, but so I didn't fill it up all the way. You can see that there's a gap there, so I can put my lid on. Now, some people worry about the vinegar rusting the lid, and you're right. Eventually it will rust the lid if you're leaving it in the same jar for a long time. So what you can do is you can get yourself some wax paper. Make sure if you have a soy allergy, it's important to know that wax paper, typically, unless you buy like some organic brand or ask otherwise from the company, they're using soy wax on it, and I don't consume soy basically in any way, shape, or form unless it's been like extremely fermented, you know. So I typically just leave a gap. You can't just use plain parchment paper because it'll just soak right through it. But if you leave a gap and you're not really shaking it a whole lot and you're going to strain this out in about 4 to 6 weeks, just like a tincture, and then you can put it in a different container that doesn't have a metal lid, and you should be all right. And honestly, these are the ball lids, you know, the canning lids. I don't find they rust that easy. I mean, it has to be in there for a long time because they have a coating. It's not bare metal. And if the outside of your ring rusts from getting a little bit of vinegar on it, it's really not the end of the world because it's not making contact with your jar. But they also sell plastic lids for dry storage. I'm not super keen on those because of the plastic aspect, but also because they're not meant to be airtight. They're meant for dry storage. And I want this to be somewhat airtight because you don't want it to oxidize a whole lot. So that's really all there is to making a fire cider. It feels like that was a lot, but really it was just cutting up, you know, some onions, some peppers, some garlic and ginger, and some citrus, and shoving it all in a jar, pouring some vinegar, putting some honey, and you're good to go. Now, you can experiment with this. I've got a huge batch going for my apothecary, like a 15-gallon batch, where I put a lot of elderberries in it. You know, you can put elderberries, you can put other medicinal roots if you want to, you can put other fruits. I've got a friend, he's been making it like crazy, and he's been putting figs in his, experimenting with all kinds of things. Basically, you're pickling it, so it's not going to go bad, you know, because the vinegar pickles it. So now, you're just going to want to stick a label on there so you don't forget about what you made. And now, unlike a tincture, this really only has maybe a 2 or 3 year shelf life. Maybe a little longer if you use pasteurized, because it can start to ferment on you. But that takes a while for that to happen, and really what you'll find is a new mother, a new vinegar mother. It looks just like a kombucha SCOBY on the top of it, and it's not the end of the world. But so make a size of batch that you're going to probably use up within the next year or two, or that you're going to share. And it's a really simple way to help boost your immune system when you're sick, to clear out your nose. And this is something that anybody can make where they live, because we didn't go out and wildcraft any of this stuff, right? So, like, even if you live in the inner city, you can probably find your way to a market and get most of these ingredients, These days, with everything that's going on, you can probably order all of it right to your door. I know that I got the citrus from an online place, because our prices here where we live are just, like, absurd for citrus, because we're, a food desert in the middle of nowhere, far, far away from anywhere tropical. But the most important thing to remember here, now this is crucial, and I really should have, said this in the beginning, but you really need to know this about making anything. You're smart enough to do this. You're absolutely smart enough to do this, and don't believe otherwise for a second. Don't believe what your inner voice tells you. Don't believe what other herbalists make you feel like. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to take your health back into your hand, because you're smart enough to do this. And you just have to start. You just have to be like, you know what? I'm going to make fire cider today, and however I make it is going to be perfectly fine. Shoot, even if you decide to use white vinegar, it's not going to kill you. Just try. Just get out there and start learning by doing, because you are absolutely smart enough to do this. And everything you learn is 100% valid. You don't need to pay money to retain this knowledge. Your brain knows how to, remember things without a money exchange. So I think I've covered everything. And I'm really grateful that you're all here with me and you let me be a human and ramble about and all these things. So if you like my videos, if you like what I'm all about, if you like how I really try to give this knowledge back and empower people, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, turn on notifications, and share. Sharing is really important, because it helps other people realize that they're smart enough to do this too. If you're watching me on YouTube, come find me on Instagram. If you're watching me on Instagram, come find me on YouTube. I share all kinds of stuff on both platforms. So thanks for watching, folks, and I'll see you next time. Bye.